Good as we're going to feel.
Yeah, microphone makes a difference.
We look good.
Okay.
We feel good.
That's all that matters.
Ladies and gentlemen, I'm so excited. Today's guest, the Trevor Bird, owner of Durango Harley Davidson. And I've been looking forward to this conversation for the better part of a year, really. I cannot wait to have the opportunity to pick your brain for many reasons. One of which, obviously, I'm excited to learn about, your perspective on business and entrepreneurship and all of that stuff. I've seen what you've done with Durango Harley Davidson, and I'm incredibly impressed.
Thank you, Ben.
But I also am excited to pick your brain about kind of this holistic story that I get to see of, the Bird family and your relationship with your wife and your kids, your involvement with the community, and a lot of observations that I've had, when we had the opportunity to work together, and I got to see some things that have really impressed me. So anyway, I'm super excited. I'm glad that you're here. I know how busy you are. So I just want you to know how much I'm looking forward to the conversation and how much I appreciate the fact that you're taking some time out of your day to let me pick your brain. So thank you a ton.
You got it, man. I'm honored to be here. And, I think of the name of your podcast, Chasing Greatness, right? And, what a cool name. I've shared with you, I've been watching a few of the recent podcasts and I've been so inspired. The stories, just getting to connect to people on that human level. It's really neat to hear their stories and equally honored to be here with you today, man.
Well, thank you. I'd love to start. So obviously everybody knows that you're the owner of Durango Harley Davidson, but I also know that that's not where the story started. A while back, you had told me a little bit about, I believe it was the dealership in New Braunfels.
Mm-hmm.
Maybe it was San Antonio. I don't remember, but I would love to hear how you got involved in ownership of the dealerships. Because if I remember correctly, you were an investor in another one or a partner, or there was some other level of.
Yeah.
Walk me through the progression from Trevor Bird, an employee,
Okay.
or
Sure.
Pre-owner of any dealership. How did you first get into it? What did that look like? What made you want to actually become a partner? What was the mindset behind all that?
Yeah, well, I hope we got a couple minutes. I'll try to give you the condensed version. And I've shared with you before, our faith, my wife and I, has played a huge role in our journey, and just believing that, God had a plan for us. My plan with Harley Davidson, it wasn't really my plan ever to work with Harley Davidson, but when I was in college, my best friend, his father, owned the Harley Davidson dealership in San Antonio, Texas. And I was going to school for a marketing degree, got out of college, and went into software development. So nothing to do with motorcycles, right? You would not even say the word motorcycle in my household growing up because it was never even an option to talk about motorcycles.
I never even realized that there was a stint in software development.
Yeah.
I'm already learning.
Yeah,
this is great.
So a little bit of time in software development. But when I was in college, my buddy, we would hang out at the Harley shop when we were back home. I went to school at TCU in Fort Worth, and we'd go home to San Antonio, and his dad owned Alamo City Harley Davidson. And what really amazed me, not being from the motorcycling community, not growing up with anybody riding Harleys in my family, when you walked into the Harley Davidson dealership, you would see guys with the Banditos, which is an outlaw motorcycle club. You would see the district attorney or the mayor or the sheriff. And at the shop, it didn't matter if you were the janitor of the $100 million company, or the janitor or the CEO of this big corporation, if you were the outlaw or law enforcement. Everybody was there for the love of the motorcycles and really what they represented, the freedom, adventure, and independence that people find on those bikes. And so I was really taken back being at this Harley shop and going, man, all these people from all these different backgrounds and different walks of life, they're all hanging out and they're smiling. And, as soon as they cross the curb and go off onto that highway, they're enemies of each other. But here they were all getting along. So my buddy's dad, he was doing a lot of racing at the time. And he said, hey, he goes, why don't you guys go out and raise some money for my race team, and I'll let you keep 25% of whatever you raise. So we incorporated our first LLC. It was called Alamo City Promotions. We were 20 years old, getting ready to go on 21. And we had some success. We raised, $30,000, $40,000 in sponsorship money. And at, turning 21, we thought we were,
That's big league.
oh yeah, masters of the universe here.
Yeah.
And I remember at college graduation sitting there and writing out, do I go back to San Antonio and do I pursue this motorsports marketing career? Do I go get a real job? What do I do? And I went with, let's go get a real job. So got into software development, graduated in 99. .com bubble was growing and growing and growing. And then by the end of 01, the .com bubble burst. And when I was in software development, we were focused mostly on CRM, customer relationship management systems. I was a business analyst, so companies like Toshiba, General Electric, Alcatel, we would go and meet with like their frontline sales force. And this was the days of PDAs, personal digital assistants, Palm Pilots and stuff. And we'd be like, okay, when you're out in the field and you're talking to a client, what information do you need to get back? And then we'd work with the database programmers and do all that. And it was great because I got to travel a lot and I got to see corporate America. And I quickly realized that corporate America, it just wasn't my cup of tea. So living in Dallas, Texas, and when that .com bubble burst, our company put out a memo and it said, hey, we're going to accept X number of voluntary resignations. And if you sign up for this voluntary resignation, you get 6 months pay and a one-time bonus and benefits for however long. And we had career coaches in the company. My career coach called me and he said, hey, you just got promoted to senior consultant. We've got some great business in the pipeline. Just hang in there. Don't take this voluntary resignation. Just hang in there. This was back when I was still drinking. As you know, it's been about just over 11 years since I picked up a drink, but there may have been a little influence of some alcohol that afternoon. I was sitting on my patio looking out downtown Dallas, and there's a book by Jack Kerouac called On the Road. And I thought it was a great idea to go ahead and quote this whole page out of Jack Kerouac's book On the Road about the only ones for me are the mad ones, the ones that are mad to live, mad to die, desirous of everything, that burn, burn, burn. It goes on. So I send that quote out to the entire company email database. And I said, it's been an honor working with you all. Here's my personal email address. Hit me up if you ever want to reconnect. And I quit.
Wow.
Yeah.
Without a plan? You just knew that there was
no plan.
Because of, I want to hear more. Love it. It gives me the chills hearing it because I relate so much to that, like seeing an opportunity, like now's my chance, and kind of that perspective of, I don't know, I call it a rich life, but taking a risk or whatever. But walk me through the decision process. Like, were you seeing?
I'll tell you exactly what I saw.
Okay.
I saw my name up on a whiteboard with a bunch of other people's names, and I saw a group of executives and people that I didn't know making a decision about my future. And I was not okay with that. So
it was more that you weren't liking where you were more than seeing where you were going?
Yeah, I mean, I think I was, there's no fulfillment in the job I was doing outside of the people I worked with. I mean, the clients that we served was great, but the whole corporate America gig, it didn't feel like there was a lot of integrity with where I was.
Yeah.
And it was really the thought of somebody else deciding my future that I just couldn't swallow. I just couldn't handle that. Even though my career coach is like, man, you're in, you're not going anywhere.
Climbing the ladder.
You just got promoted, hang in there. But it was like that chance. Like, why am I going to leave my future up to somebody else? And so I still remember that vision of a whiteboard and my name and these guys going, okay, does he stay or does he go?
Yeah.
And I wasn't ready to let someone else make that decision for me. So I quit.
Love it. Then what?
Well, then finally my USAA credit card got maxed out at about $10,000, and I realized I could not afford to live in Dallas
Time to start
anymore.
making some money. Yeah.
And I called my dad, and I said, Dad, I need some help. And I'll tell you, Ben, it was a really humbling moment. I mean, I was in my kind of mid-20s at this point. Had a very successful couple years of a career outside of college. Was making way more than what my college professor said I should be making with a marketing degree. And then I moved back home with Mom and Dad.
Wow.
And it was a really humbling experience to go from, living in Dallas, just kind of, again, feeling like you're a master of the universe, everything going our way, to sleeping in my parents' guest bedroom. And it was only a couple weeks after that, I was having lunch with my buddy Rugger and his dad Hal, and they owned the Alamo City Harley Davidson. And Hal looks at his son. He goes, "Hey, my assistant is worthless. I need an assistant to the assistant. While you're looking for a real job, I'll pay you $400 on Friday, and we need help setting up a Harley Davidson authorized rental business. We need help setting up a motorcycle safety training program." The company didn't even have email addresses at this time.
Wow.
It would have been early 2002. We need to, get email accounts. And so while you're looking for a real job, will you help our small family business as we're going through these growing pains? And I thought, well, yeah, I got to make my insurance payment on my car next week, and I need some gas. And so sure, I'll this will just be a little bridge while I'm waiting to get from point A to point B. This will kind of carry me across.
At the time, though, did you know what point B was? Or were you kind of still, because it sounds like being willing to take such a big risk that you did, and then, moving back home and kind of those humbling moments like you had talked about, was there a plan, or did you, I'm fascinated with that, the ability to make that big of a decision. And it seems to me like there maybe was like not necessarily a clear plan yet, but
No.
Was that a faith thing? Was that did you know you were headed somewhere? Like what? I just would love to hear, or was it just that you knew corporate wasn't going to work and you needed to be open to other opportunities?
Well, I knew corporate wasn't going to work, but I was still looking for a corporate job.
Interesting. Because that's maybe all you knew.
I mean, right? You got 4 years of college, got this degree. You're supposed to go work in corporate America and get a job. I also knew from those early, when I think about my entrepreneurial career, it goes back to, I guess early middle school, like 6th grade, selling cinnamon toothpicks. You could buy the cinnamon oil and make these toothpicks and sell them for 10 cents, or maybe you got 4 for a quarter. I forget what the deal was back then, but, going to the principal's office for, selling cinnamon toothpicks in middle school. So I had always been, from a very young age, I'd always worked, had always had a job, and had always been fascinated with the independence of a small business owner and an entrepreneur. And when we started the motorsports marketing company, that really lit a spark. Like, wow, you can do this.
Yeah.
Like, it takes a lot of work and sacrifice and risk. So I think in the back of my head, I always knew I wanted to own my own business. How I was going to get there, I didn't know. And I was honestly in my early and mid 20s. I was really lost. My faith was not strong. The whole Harley Davidson kind of stereotype of the party scene, and we had the party scene in San Antonio dialed in. There wasn't a GM or owner of a bar or club that we didn't know, and so
we invented it.
I was not I wasn't really so focused on what the future was going to look like, but I knew I needed to have some type of income, and that I eventually needed to start coming up with a path. And it wasn't long after I started working for the family. So in 2001, they had one main dealership and then a T-shirt shop on the San Antonio Riverwalk, and it was about a $12 million a year business.
Just the T-shirt shop?
No, the dealership. Yeah,
that's a lot of
T-shirts. No, the T-shirt shop and the Harley dealership combined. By 2007, we had opened up 2 more dealerships. We had gone from a staff of less than 30 employees to over 125 employees, and we had grown from about 12 million in revenue to over 60 million in revenue.
Wow.
So that was really, being in at that point my mid 20s and kind of being at the tip of the spear, helping grow this family business from 1.5 locations to 3.5 locations, and the org charts and designing the buildings and the marketing strategies and the events. Like I loved it. I could never get enough of it. And at that point there was really no turning back with Harley Davidson. It was like, okay, this is it. Yeah, this is what I want to do.
So when did the idea of partnership become an option? When at what stage of the career did it, kind of evolve to where, and how did that look? Did you have to write a check? Did you earn your way into, how did that stuff kind of flesh out?
So I'll take a step back even before the partnership. In 2008, when the recession hit, I remember the family calling me and they said, "Hey, you're going to go to New Braunfels to one of our dealerships and you're going to fire the GM today. And if you want to keep working for us, you're going to be the new GM of the New Braunfels." It was called Green Harley Davidson after the old dance hall, Green Hall. And I said, "Guys, I've never even put together a bike deal. Like, I've been in charge of, business development for the last 7-8 years.
And then now they want you to be the GM.
And you want me to be a GM? And I don't even know if I could sell a motorcycle." They said, "If you want a job, that's what we got." So one of the best things that came out of that experience was in college, I loved finance, absolutely loved it. I hated accounting. I took my accounting classes, pass, fail, like just get them over with, right? Well, I quickly learned after the recession that, accounting is the language of your business. And our new GM at the dealership, Tug, he is always saying the numbers tell a story. So in 2008, I moved my desk back to our controller's office. And for about a full year, I worked next to our controller because I wanted to know the balance sheet, the income statement, the gross profit, expense management. I wanted to learn it all. And so I got a really good 360-degree understanding of the business. I knew the operational side, the sales and marketing side pretty well. Now I knew the accounting,
Right.
finance side. Around 2012, I kind of started to look for other opportunities, and I'd been very open with the family. I mean, I am forever grateful to that family for the opportunities that they gave me and now my family. And I told the dad, I said, "Look, they had kids and grandkids, and it was a big family." And I said, I'm going to want to go out and do my own thing. My daughter was born in 2010. And it was only a year or two after that I was like, I now have this precious little baby that I've got to be responsible for. And, the dad said, "I can't afford to lose you." We had done some pretty incredible and wildly successful deals together. And he said, "Figure out a way for it not to cost me a fortune and don't piss off my kids. And I will gift you 10% equity in these two dealerships
Wow.
for the years of services that you provided." Now, there were some agreements that came with that. It
Of
wasn't
course.
just, here you go. But so we went through all of that, the valuations and, new operating agreements. And so that would have been 2013. I became a 10% partner in Green Harley Davidson in New Braunfels, Texas, and Javelina Harley Davidson in Bernie, Texas, which is just outside of San Antonio.
Did you understand at the time what that meant?
I did. I really did. And it was a big deal. I mean, it was a life-changing moment to have equity in a company. I felt like I'd worked for it. I felt like I'd earned it, but they didn't have to give it to me.
Right.
And the fact that they did was really, really incredible. And, there's still, even if you fast forward to 2016, 2017, when we started the process of buying Durango Harley Davidson, even at that time, on paper, it didn't really make sense. Like, we didn't have the personal net worth and the balance sheets, but that equity I had in those dealerships and the relationships that I had made with some of the leadership at both Harley Davidson Motor Company and Harley Davidson Financial Services, those two things kind of came together in a perfect storm. And Harley Davidson had reached out to me several times and said, "We would love to see you own your own dealership. And now that you are a partner, we can do X, Y, and Z to help."
There's like
make that
financial.
happen."
Oh, interesting.
Yeah.
Way cool. Isn't it crazy how sometimes like you can look back in hindsight and it's like, oh my gosh, all the hard work did pay off. It just wasn't linear.
That's right.
Like I see that so many times in my life. And it's just funny when you're telling the story about the cinnamon toothpicks. I used to rent out my parents' VHSs from our garage. Like from day one, as early as I can remember, figuring out how to have a little business and make some money. So I just related so much to that. But it's interesting, and to me it almost seems, I don't know, it's powerful to know that you were just doing what you knew best at the time, making these big deals with the dealerships before you had equity. They didn't have to, all these things. And I'm sure I know that there are thousands of, moments that occurred over that period of time. But it's just crazy how I think sometimes maybe destiny is the right word for it. I don't know. But how you can kind of look back and realize that the stars are kind of aligning and these things are like, had you not had the equity and the track record and the relationship with Harley and
Right.
you know, the opportunity wouldn't have
No.
worked, which I just think is incredibly fascinating.
Well, it really is. And, even before I was a partner, I always treated those businesses as if I had ownership in them. And, I think even with our staff here, like, I love for our team to feel like they have a sense of ownership, and they should. I mean, they do have ownership in Durango Harley Davidson. What they do outside of work, whether they like it or not, it represents
Yeah.
and reflects on our business. And I want them to be proud of what our business stands for, the values that our business has, what we do for our community, and I want them to have a sense of ownership in it. But it was really having that ownership mindset even before I was actually an owner on paper that I think helped lead up to those opportunities happening. And we have an incredible staff right now, and a lot of them are young. I mean, they're in their 20s, and man, they're hungry, right? They like want it, and they want it right now. And I'm like, guys, like, I love that. Like, don't ever let that die. But you got to realize, like, all of this takes time.
Yeah.
I mean, I had set a goal that by the time I turned 40, I wanted to own my own dealership, and I had probably set that in my early 30s. And again, it didn't make sense logically that Katie and I should have ever been able to buy Durango Harley Davidson. But that hard work, that perseverance, that doing the right thing, and you're going to make mistakes, right? You're going to drop the ball. But taking ownership of that when you make a mistake and trying to make it right. And I also tell these younger team members that relationships, they're really everything. I mean, I think in the business world, it's hard because
it's all I've got.
Well, yeah, I mean, that's right. It's 20 half of my life almost I've been in the Harley Davidson world, but I think you could apply it to any industry. Is that the relationships that you create, and in one of your podcasts, Joe, we're talking about this too, is that you never know when that person is going to circle back around in your life.
Right.
And I think it was Mr. Harper that said, I never leave things on it. I'll remember. If someone does me wrong, I won't forget. But I'm not going to
burn a bridge.
I'm not going to burn a bridge, because somewhere down the road, there might be an opportunity that comes along. And so I've tried to embrace that. Al said it much more eloquently than I just did. But I mean, those relationships, even to this day, are so important. I mean, we just got back on Friday. We were at Daytona Bike Week doing some...
Which looked so fun, by the way.
It was not bad. I'll tell you.
Looked miserable.
Yeah, riding a bike down the A1A on the beach of Daytona on Thursday, and then being on the mountain on Sunday.
Yeah.
I was like, this isn't too bad. But, one of the big reasons we were down there, again, relationships. You can only do so much through a Zoom call.
Yeah.
And having a couple hours with some of the executive team from the motor company and getting to go, check this out, Ben. Destination Daytona Harley Davidson. It's Teddy Morris, Daytona Harley Davidson. It sits on a 130-acre campus.
Wow.
They've got condos, hotels, gas stations, music pavilions, barber shops. I mean, they have escalators and elevators inside the dealership. It's like an adult Disneyland for the Harley lover. But we got to spend a full day with the new owner of Teddy Morris Daytona. And then we got to talk to people in the community about, hey, when 400,000 bikers come into Daytona, Florida for Bike Week over 10 days, what's the good and what's the bad? And that's one of the things with our community here in the Four Corners Rally is we want to see this rally grow. We want to see it have a great economic impact for all of the small businesses in our community, but we want to do it responsibly.
Yeah.
And so being able to get out there and talk to people in other communities that aren't riders, and and I will say, and it's the one thing we hear the most here, is the noise. They said after 10 days, it gets pretty old hearing the bikes. So I don't know what the solution is to that, but we're searching for some answers on how to continue to improve it.
One of the things, so first of all, I just think it's awesome to hear. Well, I've got so many questions for you, but this kind of like a mindset that you have of continual learning and improving, like being down there and learning how to make the Four Corners Rally better and things like that. So remind me to come back to that, because I have a follow-up question on the learning and continual development side of it. But what reminded me of that is you kind of had talked about the impact on the community and the, impacting the local businesses and things like that. One of the things I was most surprised with, for lack of a better term, when we started working together is when I got to observe the community events like the toy drive, for example.
Mm-hmm.
And, it's so funny because from an outsider looking in who has zero past experience in Harley Davidson culture,
Sure.
there's an appearance of Harley Davidsons that is what it is.
Right.
And you would think that it's uninviting. You would think that it's, just from outsider looking in.
Right.
And you had talked about those early days at the Texas dealerships about this inclusive place
Mm-hmm.
of everybody's on the same team and this shared love and things like that. But I got to see, even on a deeper level, this inclusivity of caring and love, and like it was so cool to get to tag along on these events and the rides and whatever, and the silent auctions, and everybody's donating toys and pictures with Santa, and there's whole families there. And I would have never expected, an organized Harley ride to have that much depth and compassion and all these great qualities about it. I guess my curiosity is, do you think that ties into some of these pros and cons with the rally side of things? Like my opinion would be that outweighs noise from time to time.
Mm-hmm.
But I'm also curious, like, where that came from. Did you learn those cultural elements at the Texas dealerships? Do you feel like you brought them here? Is that Harley wide? Is that a normal thing in the subculture?
Yeah. Well, so a few things. One, it is Harley wide, and that was something that I learned
So cool.
after being in the business for a while. I just finished. I haven't read a book from cover to cover in 3 days for a while, but Willie G. Davidson, he's one of the great grandsons of the Davidson brothers that started Harley Davidson, right? He wrote this book. I got it a year ago. I just read it while we were in Daytona. But even in his book, he talks about how in the 70s and the 80s, Harley Davidson was working with MDA and raising money. And so they have what's called the Harley Owners Group, the HOG chapter, HOG, Harley's Owner Group. And, he was talking about in the 80s, these huge rides they would do and, millions of dollars they would raise for MDA. So I think, the Harley Davidson and in general, the motorcycling community, these guys and girls, they're always doing charity rides. I mean, if a rider goes down or if somebody gets cancer and they can't pay their medical bills or fill in the blank, like they're putting rides together, they're raising monies for family. The Toys for Tots with the United States Marine Corps has been around forever. But where I really learned about giving back was when I was in San Antonio, Texas. So the owner I worked for, Hal Gottsacker, there's a group of 5 really, really successful businessmen. And I mean really successful businessmen. We flew around on a few of their private jets type successful businessmen. One of them is a small town country music singer named George Strait. A few people may
Sounds
know.
familiar.
Sounds familiar. So they were at a point in their careers, and Harley had been a big part of kind of their journeys. I mean, that's how they would escape the executive lifestyle and go for a ride down to Mexico on their bikes with the group. But they started a nonprofit called For the Love of Kids and Harleys. Well, when you've got George Strait on your board as one of the founders and he gets up as your guest auctioneer, it's kind of hard to not have a good fundraiser.
Yeah, you're going to do all right.
But it was really cool. The gentleman, David Pivoto, that was running that event for years before I got into San Antonio, he finally said, man, his businesses were growing. And he said, I can't do this anymore. And they were going to let it just die. And I was like, man, we can't. Like the charity had been around for 10 years. I asked my owners, I said, can I step up and take a leadership role and keep this going? And so we'd do a big gala and, we'd sell corporate tables for thousands of dollars and tons of sponsorship money. And as a dealership, we'd donate some bikes, and it would blow my mind. Like, we'd donate a Sportster. I was just talking to Chase, one of your team members, about a new Sportster. And, that Sportster would bring $10,000, $12,000, which was great, right? It's really good. And then George Strait would take his cowboy boots off, and he'd autograph them and say, hey, whoever wins these gets to come backstage and get a picture with me. And he'd get $20,000 for his cowboy boots. And you're like, man, the power of a brand. But what really impacted me during that time, so I led that charity for about 10 years. And on average, we would donate about $250,000 to 5 local children's charities. But I got really involved with the boards of the charities, and I went out to their operations, and I saw what they were doing at the Ronald
cool.
McDonald House. I saw what they were doing at Easter Seals. I saw what they were doing at Any Baby Can. And that to me was really a moving point, like where it was like, yeah, this is great and it's for a great cause. But when you get to see the little kids and the families that it's actually impacting, it just really, it brought it down to reality that, man, this is why raising money for these organizations is so important. And so kind of, similar story, we got here to Durango, and I'll take a step back on that too. Katie and I came up December 6th of 2016, I believe it was, to look at Durango Harley Davidson for the first time. So, of course, we stayed at the Strader Hotel, like your first time at Durango, anybody should do. We had never heard of this little thing called Noel Night, but it happened to be Noel Night. So we walk out of the Strader, and here comes Santa Claus on a stagecoach, and there's a little snow in the air, and all the merchants are outside with, their hot cider and cocoa, and
it's like you guys are in a Hallmark
we're
movie.
Just 100%, right? We're like, oh my! We figured that was every Friday night in downtown Durango.
Just Durango, yeah.
But we're like, what is this place? Like, and honestly, when we came to Durango Harley Davidson was only selling about 100 bikes a year. And in Texas, we were selling over 1,800 bikes a year. So, we were looking for a shop that was maybe 500, give or take, motorcycles a year. In Durango, a buddy from Texas said, hey, the guy who owns the shop, he's in his 70s. He doesn't have any kids. He's looking to retire. You should go check it out. So we're like, you know what? This will be a couple night break from the kids. We'll have grandma, grandpa watch them, and we'll go check out this little town of Durango. All I knew about Colorado at that time was Denver and Steamboat Springs.
Yeah.
Durango, I couldn't even point to it on a map. So we came up here, and one of the things we did that night, though, is we walked up and down Main Street, and we asked people about the Harley shop. And the most common response was, yeah, Harley, you know what? I think there is a Harley shop. I think it might be over by the mall. And we're like, what? Like, how do people, like, this small town, right? Like, they got a Harley dealership in a town of 18,000 people, and nobody really knew about it. And if they did, there was no excitement at all.
So did you see that as an opportunity?
Huge opportunity.
Yeah.
Because, back in New Braunfels, we were so involved with the community. I mean, from economic development boards to, just anything we could help out with. I loved city, county leadership. I mean, it was just a great relationship. We did a rally in New Braunfels for a few years, and got the support of everyone. And so it just kind of blew my mind that this community wasn't aware of their local Harley dealer.
Right. How interesting for you to recognize that, though, and see that as a good thing for a potential buyer.
It was such a good thing. After we toured the dealership that night, I took Katie to the Orr House for, first dinner in Durango. And I can still point out the table we were sitting at. And there was this moment, now this goes back to the faith, where I just knew. I knew that for whatever reason, God was calling us to come to Durango. And I told her, and she starts bawling. She's like, what? You mean I'm going to leave?
Wasn't feeling it? She wasn't having the calling herself?
She's a Texas girl through and through, which I love. I would never change. She's her family is everything, not just to her, but to all of our families. I mean, they mean a lot. All of our families are down in Texas. And so all of a sudden this reality that, like, yeah, we're going to put an offer in and we're going to try to buy this business and move up to Durango, Colorado. It just like, whoa.
And you had both kids at this point?
Yeah. So Reese would have maybe been 2 or 3 at that point, and so Millie would have been 5 or 6.
Yeah.
They were 4 and 6 when we moved up here. So we had both kids, and I said we're going to do this, and then fast forward, everything starts happening, and it starts happening fast. And we had to go raise some money from family and friends. We had to get some loans from the banks. We had to get a dealer license with the state. And the day came to sign the asset purchase agreement, and there was a $100,000 check that had to be put in escrow. I've never written a check with 6 figures on it in my life, and I'm like, I can't do this. I can't. Like, this is too much. I've got a great job. I'm making good money. I work for a good family. Like, that. What am I doing? I can't do this. And I got home that night, and I told Katie, I said, I'm out. And she had had this moment in her day where there are 3 things that happened to her. And one of them was this little piece of paper fell out from her little visor on her car. She has no idea how it got there. It's framed up in our house now. But it talked about walking out in the deep and having faith. And when I told her, I said, I can't do this. Like we had raised the money we needed. Everything was green lights all the way. And I locked up. And she said, no. She goes, you're writing that check right now. You're signing that paperwork. She shared with me the experiences that she had had that day. And she goes, I agree with you that this is where God wants us to be.
This is where what's supposed to happen.
Yeah. And so we
Wow.
did it. And so May 20th of 2017, I turned 40. June 20th of 2017, we closed on the dealership. So I was 30 days late, but I was still in my 40s.
Count
So,
it.
yeah.
What was well, I'm just so, I love that story. Literally gave me the chills listening to it. I share a similar sentiment. I've told the story before on the podcast, but when I was getting ready to resign from my job, I had my resignation letter typed up and I couldn't hit send. I was paralyzed for a few days. Same thing. I'm like, I've got a good job. I'm making good money. My wife's pregnant. I've got 2 young kids, and I'm about to walk away from all this for this wild unknown. And my wife has been incredibly supportive, but in this moment, it was my father who he knew I was like going to back out. He drove to Durango and spent the weekend with me. And I'll never forget sitting on a recliner. I'm sitting on the floor. I'm so scared. I'm on the floor of my living room. Resignation, and he leans forward and he goes, Ben, if you don't hit send, you'll always wonder what if.
Yeah.
I was like, whew. So I hit send. I panicked. And now, he'll tell you today he was just as scared as I was. He just was, faking it more, trying to give me the courage. But I love that, like those moments of, because you've always had this background of risk-taking entrepreneurship tendencies, clearly.
Sure.
But once it gets big, that's a different thing. And needing those support people to say, hey, Trevor, we got this.
Yeah.
And Katie kind of pushing you along, I think is the coolest thing in the world. I'm curious, one of the things that I've been personally actively, intentionally working on right now is living a rich life. Mm-hmm. And that means that there's high highs, low lows. I'm doing things. I'm experiencing new things. I'm seeing new people. A lot of it's because I stopped drinking, by the way, which has just been the most amazing thing in the world. But part of that is like I have this draw now for adventure. Mm-hmm. One of my former employees, Ryan, resigned and got a job in Hawaii. And I was telling Nicole, I'm like, I kind of envy the adventure of that, like heading to Hawaii and starting a new community and things like that. Anyway, my point is, now you write the check. It's time for the Birds to move to Durango.
Yeah.
Walk me through your emotions, Katie's emotions, your kids. Are they old enough to care, or are they along for the ride?
Our daughter at 6, borderline.
A little
bit, yeah.
But is it exciting? Is it scary? Is it
all of it, right? All of it. It's terrifying. But the excitement, man, how do you put it into words? It was,
because you're not just buying a bit, you're moving.
Yeah.
I mean, it's
away from
layers
everything we know. I was born and raised in New Braunfels, Texas. I made a full circle, and I was back there as a partner. And
we talked about how important relationships are. So, we're
tons of relationships. From AA, Alcoholics Anonymous, to our church, to our family, to our friends friends I'd grown up with from like elementary school, preschool friends. But for me, the adventure, no regrets, right? It was terrifying. The first 2 years that we lived here, I was making more my first year out of college in 2000 than I was paying myself the first 2 years we lived here. But they were so rewarding because that was our paycheck. And what we were really intentional about was putting the employees first. Every employee there, they deserved and needed a raise. And so it's a new business, right? And you've been through this, and cash is king. Yeah. And the income statement can look great, but you're like, oh, we don't have any money in the bank. And
yeah. What do you mean there's profit? Where'd it go?
Right, yeah. Right. But so we really wanted to make sure all of our managers and our employees that, first of all, we could get them up to what would be considered a competitive compensation plan. We brought back a matching 401k. We redid our paid time off and our employee handbook. And, I've always believed your company is only as strong as the team members that are serving your customers.
So true.
And so, but, those first couple years here, I mean, we were doing things as a family we never would have experienced if we would have stayed in Texas. And
finish.
Yeah, even living on a quarter of what we had been making back in Texas, like how close our family was. We had moved into a little 1,600 square foot home, but we were all in there together, and we were making it happen together. And trust me, there's still days that we're just barely making it happen together, but we are, and we've grown. The team has grown, and I mean the emotions. But I like what you said about your dad. Like, no regrets, man. If you wouldn't have sent that, yeah, you'd still have a good job, but for the rest of your life, you're going to ask yourself, well, what if I would have tried? What if I would have done that? And I've had several amazing employees throughout my career that have come up to me and said, hey, boss, I'm going to quit and I'm going to go out and do my own thing. And while part of your heart breaks because you know what an incredible employee it is, the other part's like, so have you set up your LLC yet?
Yeah.
Hey, do you need some help? Like what? And I've seen Megan Miller, Jen. I mean, there's several of them that come to mind that they took their same risk and went out and did their own thing, and now they're doing great. And so I love seeing that. I know how much fear, how much anxiety, but also how much excitement and how much reward can come with that.
I was going to ask if it made your family closer. It's so cool to hear, like, because, for our side of it too. And I'll never forget. So I resigned in October of 2021, and I'll never forget that Christmas.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, I was, we were living off of savings. I had no income, and we had the smallest Christmas you can imagine. And it is the fondest memory of mine. I have a photo of the couch with nothing on the, Santa came but there wasn't much. Yeah. And Nicole and I didn't get each other, but it was such a neat
But you
Christmas.
guys were present.
And we were there together. Exactly.
Yeah.
And it's been cool to see how, we'll come in here to the office and my boys will help wipe down tables and, Nicole will help clean up or what. It's just like kind of like by necessity. I mean, it's the same thing like when we went to the toy drive and your daughter was, helping watch my kids while I was helping film it. Just these cool, opportunities to combine family and work and life and all of those things that I think sometimes you lack in the corporate world. Sometimes it's there, but generally speaking, when you're in charge by necessity, sometimes the family has to be involved. And I just think it's interesting to consider that for every entrepreneur journey, there's a family that's along the way as well. And a lot of times, like in my world, Nicole's in the background, but she's just supporting me adamantly.
Right.
And, it sounds, and I know Katie's heavily involved and definitely was more involved early on and things like that. One of the things I'm curious to learn from you, your reasons why, is there was a moment when I think we were either wrapping up a meeting or almost starting or something. But anyway, I was in and out of your office for a minute, and we had to wrap up or start late because of you had a meeting with a coach. And you had also just talked to me about being in Florida, learning from, all the
performance group.
Yeah, the performance group and the, picking the brains of the rally organizers out there and all this stuff. It seems to me like you kind of have this intentional effort to improve and grow. And that day for me, it was really insightful because I'm like, man, here's Trevor Bird, the owner of Durango Harley Davidson. And at this point, you've been the owner for 7 years. Yeah, 6 years. I mean, you're Trevor Bird. You made it, but you still had a coach coming in and teaching you and stuff. Tell me why. What's the philosophy? What's your philosophy behind that? Why in the world does Trevor Bird need a coach? And why are you picking the brain of these people, the performance group? What are you seeing that is so important to keep growing and keep learning?
Oh, it's such a great question. And I'm probably going to screw it up, but I think it was Emerson that said, every man I meet, I look at as my superior. Through that, I can learn from him. And, I've really tried to embrace that, it doesn't matter. It could be the guy standing on the corner with a sign, please help. If you can approach that person that they have lived a life that was different than yours, and they've learned something through their journey that you may have no idea about, and approach them with an open heart and some humbleness, it never ceases to amaze me what you can learn from sometimes the most unexpected interactions with people. When my buddy Rugger and so I was sharing the incredible growth we had gone through from late 2001 to 2007, and a big part of that, a few years in, his dad had a good friend. Her name was Sally, and she had started Sally's Salsa Company. Well, Sally's Salsa was at every major grocery store throughout Texas. And he goes, how did you go from making salsa in your garage to now you have this whole statewide distribution? And she goes, my business coach. And he goes, hey, kids, y'all need a business coach. So my first business coach, her name was Raylyn, and she had the most profound impact on my life. And, she would ask me these questions about, what do you want your legacy to be? What? Legacy? Like, what are you talking about? Like, I just have enough money to go party this weekend and repeat. But she really got me thinking about the bigger picture and more than just me. One time, so when we were kind of at the peak, running 3 dealerships, 125 employees, and I try not to ever be late to meetings. It still happens from time to time, but I meet her for lunch, and she's eating her salad, and she said, hey, with this huge job you have, do you think your time is more important than others? And I confidently said, well, of course it is. I mean, I'm running a $60 million company, and I got all these employees, and she's just eating her salad, and I'm looking at her, and I'm like, I'm hearing myself saying, my time's more important. I'm like, okay, you got me. No, my time is definitely not more important than others. I'm sorry. She goes, try not to be late to meetings. And I mean, so it's just little things like that. But
And then it stuck.
oh, did it stick? Yeah, it stuck. It definitely stuck. Even back in Texas, I was part of what was called the C12 group, and it was a really interesting group. It was a faith-based, like, performance group of people from all industries, but they had one shared belief that ultimately their business was God's business, and that they should try to share God's love and hope through their business. But it was very business focused. There was definitely, how do you integrate, faith and sharing that love into your business, and they view the business world as one of the biggest, missionary or ministry opportunities out there. But these guys were constantly challenging me, and part of the reason of, you should go out and do your own thing. When we got here, we immediately got into a Harley Davidson performance group. So these guys, it's about 12 owners, and they've got about 20 dealerships between the 12 of them. But we get together 3 times a year for a couple days, and we talk about best practices, customer service, and how to run a good business. And I mean, I leave those meetings, Ben, with pages of notes. I take our general manager, and I love to constantly be learning, because there's so much out there. And even though I've been doing this 22 years, I mean, I tell the team all the time, we're just getting started.
Yeah.
I mean, we are just getting started. Like, I feel like I just got out of first gear and shifted into second. I got all the way to 6th gear to go.
Lots of room to go. Yeah. Would your advice, if somebody's listening, somebody's early on in their entrepreneur journey, we had talked about how, cash is king, and, how stressful all of this is. Where in the priority list would you put that, coaching or personal development, or those investments into it? I mean, do you believe that that's like a non-negotiable, that needs to be budgeted in expense? Or when people start to make a little money, what's kind of your perspective on that? Because it just seems like it's such a priority to you.
Yeah, well, and I think you can look at it a couple different ways. Once we moved here, I didn't have a business coach up until this past October. I finally hired a new business coach. He's out of Boston. And
that's funny, because it was probably like October when I ran into you.
Yeah, I think that's when he was in town. It feels so good to be working on myself again. And that is something, I didn't realize over the last 6 years. And you get it better than anyone else. When you're starting a new business, I mean, you're pouring your heart and your soul into this. You're hoping you've still got some time left to be with your family and, like, be actually present with them, and not, like, worried about the phone or whatever. but I had quit really working on myself. And but I don't think business coaches, especially good ones, are not inexpensive. I mean,
No.
it's a significant investment. It's a significant investment of not only your cash but your time, and it's something I take really serious. But even before I hired Bill last October, I made it a point, and I think it's really similar to what I see you doing. You surround yourself with great people, and you're always wanting to learn from them. I mean, we were talking before the podcast, even through this, like
That's why I have a
you've
podcast.
got to be constantly learning from these people that, and it's interesting. Like you made the statement earlier, like you made it, right? Like I think it's easy to look at people and think, man, they made it. But when I go home at night, I'm still going, okay, by the time we get to October, are we going to have enough cash in the bank to get all the way through the winter time without having to lay off some staff? And what happens if, I mean, there's no finish line.
Isn't
I
that
guess is what I'm
interesting?
saying.
Yeah.
And it might to other people seem like, oh, you've got it all figured out. But man, I mean, unfortunately, we've got such a great team, and our new general manager has just been doing unbelievable, which has taken a lot off of my shoulders and a lot of stress away from the day-to-day operations and allowed me to invest in myself. But, it's still at any minute, it could all go away. And so
it still feels fragile?
it does.
Oh, that's
no, it totally does.
I don't know if
Yeah.
I love or hate hearing that.
No, it still feels very fragile.
Misery loves company, I guess.
And I know I can take a step back and go, dude, look, like it's gonna
It's
be
not
okay.
that bad.
It's
Yeah.
gonna be okay. Like, but yeah, no, it still feels like at any second it could all go away. And you had talked about living a rich life a little bit earlier, and I think that's something I've really focused on. And a rich life isn't about the nicest trip to the Bahamas or whatever, but it's that quality time with your family,
Yeah.
with your friends. The way you push yourself through running and all that. Like, man, I would love to get back involved in some physical, something more than just snowboarding a couple times a week.
Yeah, but I mean, like, watching you and how much you support Reese on the,
yeah.
I mean, those are rich experiences.
Rich experiences. I tell him, and whenever my daughter goes out with us, that time on the mountain with those kids, those are memories that I will cherish forever, right? And you can't take any of the material stuff with you, but I think those memories with them, and I don't mean to keep referencing Mr. Harper, but when he talked about legacy, it really hit me because do you remember what he said? His legacy was his kids. He was my kid, and it really made me step back and go, man, at the end of the day, that should be where my focus is, because they are the ones that are going to, and what we teach them now, the values, how to treat people, how to respect people, how to love people, like that's going to hopefully carry on for generations.
Yeah.
And so I've really been trying to focus on that rich life, meaning to me that I've got the time to spend with the family. I got time to come and hang out with guys like you and do cool podcasts. I got time to go snowboarding or ride motorcycles with the team. And, there's something about when you're riding a motorcycle 60, 70 miles an hour down a highway, 3 or 4 feet from another guy, you build a certain level of trust.
That's a rich experience right
is.
there.
But in snowboarding's kind of the same. I mean, if you're both, dashing down the mountain, like you got to know how they move and where they're going to go. And so I love being able to get out and share those experiences, whether if it's with our team members or our family, and it's been really good.
Can we talk about sobriety?
Hell yeah, we can talk about sobriety.
Because one of the things I've noticed, so I'm closing in on 9 months. I'll be 9 months at the end of March. And I've realized that I was telling my wife the other day, I'm like, I feel like I'm back to like myself. Like I'm back to who I was. I'm experiencing rich things.
Mm-hmm.
I'm feeling the highs. I'm feeling the lows. I'm, which sucks. I have to like feel all of the things, but I'm feeling them all and I'm loving it. I'm realizing that, my anxiety has all but subsided. I'm happier. I'm more stable. All these just amazing things. But to sum it up way simply, I've leveled up. Like I feel like everything has unleashed to a new level now. Like my running, I couldn't be near where I am if it weren't for, getting sober.
Sure.
The business, the attention I can spend. Anyway, all of these things. I'm curious, from your perspective, do you think you could be where you are without, had you not gotten sober?
Absolutely not. No way. There's no way. And I think back to my drinking career, And for the majority of it, it was a lot of fun.
Oh,
Like,
yeah.
I mean, I was not like a big day drinker. I never got a DWI. I never got in trouble with the law. I mean, I caused plenty of trouble out there, but um,
So, by definition, though, was it I mean, and clearly it was a problem for you to, stop. But like, were you, like, did you hit rock bottom, or did you realize
yeah,
that it's
no,
holding you back?
I hit rock bottom. So there's this whole stage where drinking was fun. We were the life of the party. We were throwing huge parties. I mean, we were concert promoters. We were boxing and mixed martial arts cage fight promoters for 10 years in Texas. I mean, throwing parties is what we did, whether it was at the Harley shop or through whatever. And I'm ashamed to even say this, but when my daughter was born, there was this pressure I'd put on myself of how can I be responsible for this beautiful soul? Like and that's when drinking went from this fun social thing to, coming home and having 2, 3, 4 too many, and just and it really hit me. So my family practice doctor is also my godfather, and my mom's father died when she was 12 years old from cirrhosis of the liver. He was a very successful rancher, businessman out in Kerrville, Texas. And he loved, my grandmother said he'd do a jigger of whiskey with a Coca-Cola back. So I learned that jigger's a shot, right? A shot of whiskey, but just shot, Coke, shot, and that was
Right.
my drink, Jack and Coke, man. That was like my go-to. And I had put on a lot of weight. I mean, I was pushing 210. I'm about 175 now. I look at old pictures. I'm puffy and I just don't look good.
My wife calls it my fat face.
Yeah, right. But I was dying. I mean, my cholesterol was like over 300. My triglycerides were over 3,000. My liver enzymes were starting to spike. And my doctor said, "You've got a choice. You can quit drinking, or your daughter can relive the same story that your mom
Oof.
did, and you're not going to be there for her to walk her down the aisle when she gets married. You're not going to be there for her when she walks across the stage at graduation. You're going to be dead."
It's about as heavy of a statement as I can imagine.
You would think that'd be enough to get someone to quit drinking.
Well, but
But
we
it,
also know what alcohol is.
it wasn't. And so, not going too deep into it, but it was enough to get me to quit for 30, 45 days or so. And then something would happen. And, we'll go out for a drink
There's
with
the
the guys.
thing, yeah.
And then it started to get dark. And what was really dark to me is that I wasn't being 100% myself with my wife. I was hiding it from her. No, we're good. We're not drinking over here. And that really hurt because she has loved me so unconditionally and put up with so much BS, in the early parts of our marriage. And so there was a couple different, 30, 40, 60, maybe even 90 days, quit, and then something would start, and then it would end even worse than where I left off. And finally, without getting into any of the gory details, I hit what I would call rock bottom. I mean, Katie had the kids and said, "I love you, but as long as you're going to pick that bottle over your family, I can't be here anymore." And so I remember that day, that morning, I was in the shower and I fell to my knees. And, at this point, my faith wasn't a huge part of my life. And I remember falling to my knees in the shower and literally crying and just saying, "God, I can't do this anymore. I can't carry this. I don't know how to quit. I need your help. I don't want to drink anymore." And I got out of the shower and I Googled AA New Braunfels, and I found an AA meeting. And I remember telling Katie, "Hey, I'm going to go to this 12 o'clock AA meeting." She said, "Okay, good." She
Yeah.
goes, I'm glad." She goes, "We're not going to be here when you get back, though. Check in with me this evening. I love you, but we're leaving."
Right.
Um, and everybody, I think, has their own unique story when it comes to if they have had to fight the battle with alcohol or drugs. And, for me, it was a little bit of both. But AA for me was huge because I had learned I couldn't do it on my own. There are people definitely much stronger than me that can go, "Nope, I'm done. and I'm good. But those first few years, because I mean, I remember writing in my journal, and I'll go back and read it, but alcohol was a part of everything. You know, if there was a big win, you were celebrating by getting drunk with the boys.
If there was a big loss,
you were, yeah, drowning it. I mean, everything, every event, birthday party, holiday, it didn't matter. Like alcohol was, it just became part of who you were. And so you were talking about kind of relearning yourself. The other thing I learned, and I don't know if you've been through this, is you quickly learn who your real friends are.
Oh
too.
yeah.
I learned that a lot of my, what I thought were close friendships were all just built around partying. And so I probably have fewer friends today, but the friends I have today are people that I know I can count on.
Yeah.
And it's not just because I'm the guy buying the round of shots at the bars. It's because there's real
depth.
substance. There's depth there.
Yeah.
Yeah. And I never, ever would have been able to accomplish what I have over the last 10, 11 years if I would have kept drinking.
It's just so interesting because sobriety, I think, can be lonely. So can business ownership.
Mm-hmm.
You know, a sober entrepreneur, you know, there's not a ton of them. But the relationships that you do have substance. They're depth. A defining moment for me, I was the best man in my brother's wedding this last summer, and it was when I was sober. And I'll never forget, like, you know, that was one of those, like, how am I going to do this?
Mm-hmm.
I'm going to, you know, because I've got to do the bachelor party stuff. I've got to do the best man speech. I've got to stay late. Like, I've got to be the guy. It matters to me that I'm a good best man.
Right.
And I crushed it sober. And it was fun. I had a great time. I woke up the next morning and I murphed, and I was like, oh my goodness, this is doable.
Yeah.
Like, anyway, it just was changed. But I also think it's important because I think, you know, to your point of like that, because it kind of ties in with your business coach and, you know, all of these things. I think it's important for anybody listening when you see somebody like Trevor, or, you know, you've made it, you've got it figured out. Some of those themes we've sort of touched on, that there's been an incredible journey to get there. You know, you know, I don't know. I just think sometimes people think, oh, you know, you own XYZ business or you've done XYZ, and they think that they're just, you know, you wrote this fat check and moved into the corner office, and sometimes miss all of these journeys. And at least for me, and it sounds like for you as well, that sobriety is a huge part of that, you know, the evolutions and the work and things like that. So I just love it. And I think people need to talk about it more often.
I agree.
I think that it's sort of stigmatized, and, you know, even if it's not a problem, it might be, you know, those types of things.
You know, when we were down in Daytona last week, there's this really cool cat out of Denver. He's a stunt rider, and he's been sober, I think, about 6 months now. And he was saying this was his first motorcycle rally to go to, not drinking, right? And it's hard because you're used to it being.
Oh yeah,
like this,
I remember
and
my
now
first
it's like
camping
that.
trip without drinking.
Right. Yeah. even on the grill cooking
Yeah.
some hamburgers or steaks, you're like, wait,
Yeah.
where's that cold beer?
I'm drinking more LaCroix than I can count.
Yeah. Well, and what's great is, you know, today there seems to be so many great non-alcoholic substitutes out there, whether it's Seedlip or whatever. I mean, most restaurants now have a mocktail menu.
Yeah.
And even though it's a little hard to pay $8-10 for a mocktail.
For sugar water.
Yeah. But this kid, you know, he came up to me and he said, because I've tried to be really open about it. I mean, I keep my AA chips displayed in my office above my uncle, who he died due to alcohol and drugs, and, you know, that's a whole nother story. But it sparked conversations. And, you know, when he said, man, it was really interesting to watch someone who owns a Harley shop, owns a motorcycle rally, but you don't drink, but you're still, like, seem like you're having all this fun and you're happy. And he's like, how do you do it? I'm like, man, it's not easy. It's every day. Every day I start, you know, with a little prayer, a little quiet time. And hey, you know what? If someone goes, are you never going to drink again? You know, all I'm worried about is today. I'm today.
One more day.
I'm not going to drink. When tomorrow gets here, we'll worry about tomorrow. And that kind of mindset of living life one day at a time.
Yeah.
You know, we can't do anything about the past. Yeah, we want to plan and get ready and prepare for the future, but you can't really worry about it too much because it's not here yet. So just be present today. And if you don't want to drink or use, then just today, just don't do it. And so to see people like you and other people being able to talk more openly about it, you know, 11 years ago, I mean, I remember walking in that AA room. I mean, I was ashamed. I mean, I was just, and it's a small community, and I was really well known, and it was like, oh, wow. But what I realized is, alcoholism, it doesn't discriminate.
Oh no.
It doesn't. I mean, it's just unbelievable. And when you listen to those stories, there's so many similarities. But the big thing is how people were able to get over that and experience life without being powerless over alcohol.
Yeah.
And have that power back where it's your life. You get to make the decisions. And
You may not know this, but you shared, and it impacted me in a huge way. So I've told you the story. You and I first interacted when I needed a motorcycle for a commercial shoot way before we worked together, and you jumped at it, and it made such an impression on me of like, just really cool, of like living the values that you've built in your business on the phone with me. And it was the first time we ever spoke. And I needed, for anybody listening, I needed a motorcycle 90 minutes away from the dealership,
Wolf Creek
like
Pass, right?
right now,
Yeah.
so I put it out on social media, like it fell through. You called me, like I can have a guy bring it up. I'm like, great. I'll give him a hotel room. Like, let's make it a great for anyway, made a huge impact on me. And, so that's how we connected. And then we became friends on social media that was the depth of it. I had the one very impactful interaction from, jumping at the opportunity to have the motorcycle involved. Didn't ask for any money. I think I've paid your employee $100 in a hotel room.
Ute Mountain Casino.
Yeah,
right?
the
Yes,
casino.
Ute Mountain. Yeah.
And anyway, but because of that, we were friends on Facebook. And not too long afterwards, I had a family member, without going into detail, in rehab. And while they were in rehab, it was a lot for us. I was very involved. We went for family week, and anyway, it was a whole thing. During that, you shared to social media an anniversary sobriety post. And it's interesting, like you should know that made a huge impact to some guy that you had never even met in person. And I think that, I don't know, just as human beings, we need to do a better job of letting people know, first of all, that it's like that vulnerability was powerful, like having the courage to share it. Maybe it was your 10-year or whatever, but it was like I was like, I didn't even know. And how great, because here's Trevor, who I don't know, but I know on social media, and he's successful. And here we are, going through this journey as a family, and it mattered. It made an impact. And I just think that that's such a powerful little microcosm of how important vulnerability is and how important connection is. And then, on my end, need to tell you that it mattered, that I know that it made an impact. And I think so many times people think that we're talking into an echo chamber or that nobody's listening,
Right.
but they are, and it matters. And so anyway, that was a powerful, like your openness with it impacted me years ago.
I appreciate you sharing that, because there always is a little bit of a struggle, like sharing those, and I do it every anniversary, but it's not about me. It's not me trying to be like, hey, look, I've got X number of years, but I do it for that reason of maybe this could help inspire somebody. And so there's always that little internal struggle about, are you doing this with the right intention at heart, which I believe I always have. But it has blown me away, Ben, how many people over the years, especially since moving here, have approached me and shared a similar story to that.
Isn't that cool?
That said, hey, my wife and I just celebrated 1 year, and we're sitting in the service department of the Harley shop, and he's like, when you shared that post, and it's like, wow, like that, it does matter. And I think being able to be vulnerable and say, yeah, there are all these struggles and all this stuff that we don't necessarily have to talk about, but if you do open up and talk about it, someone else who's going through that at that moment, it might give them the courage or the strength to go, you know what, I can do this.
I can too.
I can too.
Yeah.
And the rewards, I mean, it's just, yeah, I couldn't imagine life any other way right now. And don't get me wrong, there's still those moments where you've had a day and you're like, oh man, a nice stiff drink sounds really good right now. But I'm at a point now that you can very quickly shift and go, hey, why don't you go play a game of Fortnite with your kid or
Right.
something else to,
Right.
go throw the basketball.
Go on a
or-
run. That's what
That's what I need to start filling in the blank with. Go on a run.
And you can tell if you pay attention to my social media, you can gauge my stress levels based on mileage. If I have a big mileage week, you know that, fighting some battles. But I've had a similar thing with my running. I was nervous about, I try to share it, try to, do the little Instagram stories and things like that. And
Right.
at first I'm like, maybe people are making fun of me or whatever. I'm all insecure and nervous. But then all of a sudden a few people are like, hey, look what I did, or message me and, ran a 5K or whatever. I'm like, oh, how cool is this that
No doubt.
we get to have these meaningful connections with people in different ways now. I say all the time that we don't need to use social media less. We need to use it more intentionally and, be careful about the content we're consuming and the things we're listening to. I mean, it's like you seeking out, these people that you can learn from and being purposeful about what we share. It's so fun to see. It's a perfect segue. I have a shirt for you, and I just want to tell you, Trevor, how much I appreciate who you are, and I appreciate you giving me an opportunity to pick your brain. I have about 100 other questions, but in the interest of time, I'm gonna star it for a round 2 with
Perfect.
Trevor at in a different session, because I really do have so much I can learn from you, and I want to thank you for being who you are. Thank you for leading by example. Thank you for making the impact in the community that you're making. Thank you for making the impact on me that you've made before we work together, while we work together, and after we work together. It matters, and I just want you to know how much I appreciate it. So the shirt, before we wrap up, because we were talking about it, is one of my Inspire
right
by
on,
Example
man.
shirts, because
yeah.
you inspire by your example the life that you live, and it's such a unique way that you're doing it, because it's not salesy. It's not, you're just living your life. You're living by example, and like sharing those anniversaries, it just matters. And so thank you for everything.
Well, and Ben, right back at you, man. I don't know if people tell you enough, but I mean, watching the way you have grown this business, what your business has done in this community, what your business has done for our dealership and the rally. I mean, and then watching how beautifully you balance that with self-care, being a great father, a great husband. Like, man, I hope you give yourself enough credit too, because you are an inspiration. You're an inspiration to me. I'm so grateful to get to spend this time with you, and thank you very much.
It means a ton coming from you.
You got it, brother.
Thank you, Trevor.
Yeah.